Hello and welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Riches. Lord Haskins of Skidby, Chris Haskins, was chairman of Northern Foods from 1980 to 2002, Tony Blair's rural czar during the foot and mouth crisis of 2001, and now, as well as being pro-chancellor of the Open University, he is chairman of the Humber Local Enterprise Partnership, and he joins me now. Chris, thank you very much for coming in.
Not at all.
That description seems to be the description of definitely a member of the great and the good.
I don't think I'd say that. I mean, I think I'm a member of somebody who ran a company which made quite a lot of money.
Well, it certainly is an expertise for being able to make a judgment about the economic and business circumstances of the Humber. Before we go on to that, there was some good news for the Humber region last week.
There was indeed. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer were both in Yorkshire. The Prime Minister came to Goole, and between them they announced a number of interesting projects. On the north side of the river, the much awaited electrification of the railway line from Hull to Selby looks as if it's now going to happen. Both of them have supported the project that we put forward, which is a largely privately financed project, which is very encouraging. As far again in Hull, which has got the City of Culture coming up in 2 years' time, we have a problem about connecting the old town with the main town. We need a bridge, and unfortunately it's complicated with the roadworks we're doing, so they've now agreed to separate the two projects, and we'll get the bridge even if the road is going to be delayed, so we're going to be well connected in time for the City of Culture.
So the bridge in time for City of Culture, not necessarily the road?
I think that's the way it's going to be.
What about on the South Bank? The infrastructure down here is, it feels very, it takes a long time to get to London from, say, Cleethorpes or Immingham.
Yeah, a lot of people looked at the case for electrification. I'm sure it will come in due course, but it won't justify the volume of traffic that is needed to make it work, you know. So I'm afraid people are going to have to live with the present arrangements till.
You talked about the government, I mean, Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and their, the goodies they're handing out in front of the general election, I suppose. Part of the LEP, your organisation, part of its role is to lobby government. What are you lobbying them for?
Well, I'm lobbying them on 2 points, really. First of all, to devolve power on areas such as skills, to give us more responsibility here. That isn't extra money. It's just making sure that we, local business people, local authorities, local colleges, have more say over the sort of the way money is spent on skills. Much better to do this at the local level rather than top down. The second element is infrastructure. Things like the railway lines, things like the railway line of the South Bank, for example, has 65 freight trains a day going along here. It's the busiest railway line in the country. And it requires to be changed because the new containers that are coming along are bigger. We need to change the carriage. That's being done. That sort of lobbying is what we're up to. We do also get money for specific projects, growth funds, which we administer, we hand out and administer.
There's also the government is responsible for the macroeconomic policy that affects the whole country, every business in the country, including Humberside. And it decides how much tax they pay, those businesses. It has some say over the interest rate, and it has some say, of course, with the relationship with Europe. So if we take those points one at a time, what sort of tax regime would you be looking for to help Humberside?
I don't think we're looking for any. I might look for them, but it's not possible, I think, to get any significant devolution of tax powers to Humberside or to the north of England. I think it's a waste of time, and that's not a priority for me.
It wasn't necessarily devolution. It could be tax powers going up or down across the whole country. It doesn't have to be just.
Oh, generally a tax. Well, I mean, I think that I'd be halfway between the two political parties. I think one's got to balance austerity and the need to reduce deficits with the need also to invest long term, separating current expenditure from long term expenditure.
When you say halfway between the two political parties, that there is a party halfway between the two political parties. May I take that as an indication of your party loyalties?
Well, no, I was kicked out of the Labour Party a few years ago, so I'm no longer party political.
Well, I must just clarify that. You were kicked out of the Labour Party because you wanted to support a person who happened to be a Liberal Democrat in the
happened to be Liberal. He was a friend of mine, Danny Alexander.
Well, and he's gone on to greater things in the current government. He's the Treasury Secretary, isn't he? We talked about tax. Interest rates, now they've been independent since 1997 and under the control of the Bank of England rather than the Chancellorship. Is that a good thing? Is it a good thing that we have such low interest rates at the moment? And if it is, why isn't much more money being lent?
Well, the very low interest rates are rather a bad sign, because it means that people don't want to borrow money, and governments and banks are encouraging people by cutting the interest rates lower and lower and lower, and people still seem reluctant to borrow money. So I think very low interest rates and very low inflation is a bad sign rather than a good sign.
I want to just one more big economic idea is for the last few years, the quantitative easing has been lowering the value of the pound against the value of other currencies. That seems to be stopping, and certainly with the relationship with Europe, there's quantitative easing effectively of the euro now. So is that going to mean that our trading riverine economy is going to get much better because we can, because it's going to get much worse because we find it so much more difficult to sell to Europe?
I think that's already happening. I think the signs are that exports to Europe have been suffering, and particularly it's not just the exchange rates, not just the interest rates, it's the fact that the European economy, demand within the European economy is very slack.
How do we respond?
Well, we first of all hope that the Europeans put their house in order, and we encourage them to do that. Secondly, we also have to make sure that we are more efficient, and we've got to be more productive. And things don't get solved just because you have a soft currency. You've got to be keen to take, for example, energy. I mean, there's a huge amount of improved productivity to be achieved in energy in this area, and those are the things we have to concentrate on. Some of the things are frankly outside our control. In the global world, you know, money swings around from one country to another.
Well, would you lend a fiver to the Greek government?
Not at the moment.
No, nor would I. Some of the people investing in the Humber region are Europeans, though. I mean, Dong is the one that comes to mind immediately. And we're getting that inward investment from outside the UK.
Yeah.
Why do we need their money? Why haven't we got our own to create this energy industry?
Because we are, first of all, we're a member of the European single market, and I'm a great fan of the European single market. And just as much as Dong money may be coming in here, our money is going elsewhere. You know, that's the way the world is. You know, and open markets create that movement of capital, which is a healthy thing. Why are Dong and people and for Siemens coming here? Well, they have the technology in it. They have these are their specialities, and we want them to be here. What I want them to do is to come here and then employ local people.
The fact is that this part of the world has previously been dependent on one industry, and it suffered dreadfully when that industry's disappeared. In Hull and Grimsby, I'm thinking of the fishing industry especially. How sensible are we to put all our eggs in one basket, as it were? I don't know if you can put eggs in a windmill and to be dependent on one industry.
No, well, the one industry, the only definition of what the one industry to me is energy. Energy is the biggest single issue facing businesses, facing governments over the next 30 or 40 years. How we manage the energy policy, how we deliver the energy to make sure that we can deliver what the economy needs and what people need, and at the same time protect the environment. And this estuary produces 25% of the country's energy. And I've managed to persuade national government that this puts us of strategic importance to the country. Now, other people have made the point you've said, including Michael Heslin, said, don't be too dependent on energy. I've got to start somewhere.
I just want to dig a little bit deeper into that figure, 25% of the energy of the country.
Yeah.
Do you mean by that that comes from renewable energy?
No. There's a gas or coal. The coal, Immingham imports, I think it's 30% of the coal which goes to the Drax stations. These two refineries in Immingham, again, are producing 25% all the country's oil requirements. We've got biomass coming, all the renewables. The only thing we haven't got is nuclear.
I just want to talk about the ports, and we'll go on after the break as well to talk about the ports further. But we have in Immingham, Grimsby, Hull and Goole, we have the biggest seaborne trading centre of this island seaborne trading nation.
Yeah.
Why don't we celebrate that more? Why are we not more aware of that?
Well, partly it's not that's the figure. I agree with that. A huge amount of that is bulk stuff, is boatloads of coal, boatloads of oil, boatloads of cars. I want, and none of those create a huge amount of local employment. I want the ports to be a basis for creating large amounts of local employment. 30 years ago they did, before this forklift truck came along when they went on strike, and before the forklift truck came along, and that was a big employer. That's all gone with automation. So if you go into a port now, it's quite depressing how few people you see.
Well, that's a point. I mean, you mentioned the automation and the technology there, but that's a general truth throughout the economy, isn't it? That
Yeah.
as technology allows efficiency to get better and more impressive, you need fewer people, and people are a cost.
That's
so if
true.
you need fewer people, then that's always going to be a drive towards unemployment.
That's a global problem. But interesting things are happening here, even on that. If you take China, lots and lots of British companies gave up sourcing stuff here and started bringing it in from China. Lots of the retailers know. We have this in a company called Hygiena, which was in Howden, which is producing kitchens. That company decided to source them from China for a number of years. A new company has emerged, which is now sourcing them back to this country at Barton and Humber.
So we're exporting kitchens to China.
We're certainly not necessarily exporting kitchens to China, but we're not importing kitchens from China. We're making our own kitchens.
I am delighted by the idea of the Chinese using woks made in Barton upon Humber. That's an absolute delight. Lord Haskins, we must stop there for one moment. We'll be back after this break. Please join me again after these short ads when I'll be talking again to Lord Haskins. Welcome back. I'm still talking to Lord Haskins, Chairman of the Humberside Local Enterprise Partnership. One of the big issues, which in a partnership of companies and government and commercial operations coming together, one of the great issues that tears them asunder is the fight for the so-called Killinghome Triangle between Able UK and ABP, Associated British Ports. Once again, just last week, there were moves by ABP to investigate the possibility of appealing or overcoming judgments made in Parliament and in the courts to let the Able development continue. Why is ABP doing this?
You tell me. We, the LEP, took a position some months ago unanimously to support the Able proposition. It has been through all the regulatory processes. It's been through a very, very intense planning process. It's been referred to the Secretary of State, who agreed to that. It's been through the House of Parliament. It's now been through a judicial review. All the time, the people who make these decisions are saying this is okay as a project. ABP, for their own reasons, are objecting. I'm very sad about this because I want to work with ABP as much as I want to work with Able to develop the economy, and I hope this issue can be put to bed pretty soon so that we can get on with real stuff.
Well, it's impossible, really, to hope too much for the Humber economy without the cooperation of ABP.
ABP is absolutely critical to the whole thing. They are very much. To be fair, ABP have done some very good stuff, particularly in Hull, in bringing Siemens there. ABP have invested heavily there, and they're doing a lot of stuff in Grimsby as well. But I want them to do more.
But so just with the Killinghome Triangle, it's difficult trying to work out what cui bono. How do they benefit from being such sticks in the mud, if I may use a surprisingly appropriate metaphor?
Their argument would be that they need more space on the Humber, and that these
because they all of a sudden they need a new pier.
That's their argument. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's their argument, and I'm not convinced that that's. I mean, they may do. I mean, they may do, but the greater need is what's a bird in the hand is worth more than two in the bush.
You touched on education and training a little earlier on. The colleges and academies and even the universities around here have been tooling up, as it were, to start training people for the renewable energies industry. Are we going to get to a point where that's the only thing that people from Humberside know about?
No, I don't think so. No, we've got a big chemical industry here, and these jobs, which are very high-skilled jobs, are not an end in themselves. I remember John Major telling me that up in Nissan in Sunderland, when they built that factory, he said for every one job that Nissan produced, there'd be 4 to 6 ancillary jobs created, and that is the attraction. that you generate a total economy. If you get one big industry going, that creates its own momentum elsewhere.
Every employee goes home and spends money on something else which employs
Correct.
somebody else.
And the trick is to make sure that that money stays within the area. The trick is to make sure that we don't have a situation we have at the moment where quite a number of highly skilled workers are being flown into Grimsby every weekend to work out in the North Sea and then go back. And the companies don't like it because it's very expensive, but we have to make sure that we have the skilled people who can do those jobs for the companies locally.
But how can we keep them here if there are people elsewhere in the UK or, as you pointed out, a global economy who will pay them more?
Well, you have to persuade people that this is a good place to live. Our wages have to be competitive. We have to make sure that we're paying a sensible wage, but we should be. It's a cheaper place to live. It's got a lot of attraction for living here, and I don't see why we can't compete in that area.
Well, you know that, and I know that. It is an extremely cheap place to live, and a fairly average wage will go an awfully long way here. You can live like a prince on a pittance in quite a large part of this area. And it's extremely beautiful, and it's extremely hospitable and full of extremely charismatic people. Why do we have a bit of a, maybe it's the Yorkshire thing, but why do we have a bit of a dour reputation around the rest of the country?
Well, I mean, this area hasn't been mainstream England ever in a way. The Industrial Revolution sort of half passed this part of the world aside. It's been a great port area. It's been great for ports and fishing and all that sort of stuff, but it's almost cut itself off from the rest of the world. When I first came here, there was a hugely thriving fishing and docks industry. That went, but the disconnection was still there. And what I'm trying to do now is to build up connections. For example, this whole idea of reviving the north of England. It's been a heck of a job to persuade people that the Humber is part of the north of England, but we're winning now, and they are getting. About a year ago, when the Chancellor was talking about it, he talked about the railway line from Liverpool to Leeds, and I said to George, "What about Hull?" And he said, "Oh, I hadn't thought about that." And we banged that. Now they are thinking about it, and every time today he mentioned Hull and the Humber several times, and that is very encouraging.
The migration, the infrastructure we talked about, but you also mentioned the fact that the skilled workers are coming in from other places in the world, and that we want to keep those jobs here. We don't want to give those jobs to people who have to be flown in. But there are also all sorts of other jobs here that we don't seem to want to do, and we have an increasingly large migrant population from Eastern Europe, and they're increasingly an economic necessity.
Absolutely. I mean, I really do take issue with the government. Some members of the government who think that immigrants are a burden on the economy. They're a vital part of the economy at all levels. If you go into the city of London, you'll find that about 30% of the people are non-British.
There's an awful lot of Americans in the city.
A lot of Americans, a lot of French, a lot of all over the world, a lot of Asians, all of those. If you then go into the fields of Lincolnshire, and you find that most of the people doing these arduous jobs are Eastern Europeans. If they weren't there, you wouldn't be picking the Brussels sprouts there. They'd be coming from somewhere else, because unfortunately our people don't want to do these rather tough antisocial jobs. So you either have those people there or you don't have an industry.
Why don't our people want to do them? Why do we have unemployed people, which we do at a high rate in various parts of East Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire, and yet we need migrants to come and pick the Brussels sprouts?
Well, some of it is deeply cultural. I mean, some of it in Hull and Grimsby, you will find families where for 3 generations they've not worked. So they've become, I mean, it's very tragic. They've become a sort of a dependency culture and try to survive in the system. They can't really survive in the system legitimately. And the idea of getting up to work, I mean, my argument is anybody who wants to turn up to work and has got basic numeracy and literacy will get a job now. But those jobs don't necessarily appeal to today's workers. So therefore, markets being markets, other people come along and do them.
There's a necessity to maintain the renewable energy economy, the chemicals economy, which you mentioned on the Humber as well, and the ports and logistics economy. But the other great economy in this area is farming. It's the rural economy. And as you've said, that requires a lot of people coming in from outside. What's to be done for farmers? Are always complaining.
Yeah, I'm a farmer. I know how to complain.
Are you justified in your complaints?
No. Farmers are the luckiest people in the world in a way, because they've got a wonderful lifestyle, really, for the most part. Usually, if they own the land, they're sitting on a pot of money. I know it's only theoretical, but it's very reassuring to be sitting on a pot of money. They do have to suffer the vicissitudes of variabilities. Weather changes things, global currencies change things, markets go up and down. You always hear market farmers complaining when the prices are at the bottom. You don't hear them complaining when the prices are at the top. And if you're an intelligent farmer, you take the rough with the smooth and you look at it over 10 years. Now, sometimes you'll get an industry like the dairy industry going through profound structural problems. And it's a very sad one, because actually, despite the fact that you hear about a dairy crisis, the very large dairy farms are still making money. The trouble is, modern technology, again, is squeezing the smaller operators out of the market.
The rural economy depends, and I just want to bring you to a precisely political point here. The rural economy depends partly on money that's generated by Europe and the Common Agricultural Policy, and of course by access to those workers. Many in the coming general election object to want to make migration a big issue. What do you say to them?
I say that they're just very short-sighted, very foolish. They don't understand that this country has always operated on an open market base, open barrier. We've been free traders for 200 years. We couldn't have done what we did in the 19th century in expanding if we hadn't been free traders. If we hadn't, on the one hand, been able to access other people's markets, on the other hand, let people into this market, whether it's people or their goods. We are the leaders in free trade, and those people who say we should give up free trade and go back to 1845, which is what we would be doing, they're crackers.
The Corn Laws you're talking about here, going back to that.
Crackers.
But the migration issue might just be is a cloak for some of the parties for a withdrawal from Europe, from the institutions of the European Union and the market of the European Union.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a massive crisis coming up if we do have a referendum on Europe, and if that was lost, lots of things would happen. People forget that if it was lost because the English voted in favour of coming out, but the Scots voted in favour of staying in, that would be the end of the Union.
That is a whole separate issue, which I don't think we have time for. I do just want to finish off by asking a little bit more about the work of the LEP. What can people do if they want to get involved with that, and how can they benefit from it?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned the skills agenda, and we've got all the colleges, and I hope the schools and the university very much working together to create our own approach to skills agenda, and I hope that people talking to the colleges and the schools will get that message that we're doing things locally. We've got to, people complain about the trains, well, we're trying to do something about the trains.
Well, I complain about the trains all the time, that's my main thing. Lord Haskins, thank you so much for coming, and I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Please join me again next week when I'll have another hot topic for you. Until then, goodbye.